Today I'm reviewing the Kiwi Ears Septet. Now this is a quadbrid IEM. It's got an exotic driver mix of one dynamic driver, 4 balanced armatures, 1 planar and 1 piezoelectric. Let's get it. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. So yeah, this is quite an interesting one. The Kiwi Ears Septet coming in at a price of $269 US. So this is what it looks like. We've got all metal shells with an open back. And what open back tends to do is it gives you a more expansive soundstage or a wider soundstage. That is certainly the case here. We'll get onto that later on. But the shells, they're reasonably small, especially considering that mix-up of all those different types of drivers inside, quite small. And when it comes to comfort, they're reasonably good as well. I did have a little bit of trouble getting a secure fit. I think that was mostly due to the ear hooks on the cable here. The cable is pretty standard. It's the one that comes with several Kiwi Ears IEM models. This is a modular cable too, and it comes in the box with a 3.5mm termination and a 4.4mm balanced termination. So nothing fancy, but a pretty good cable overall. Before we get into how this sounds, I want to highlight the point that these are really quite hard to drive, especially if you're using the 3.5mm termination. Now I have mine on here because I was doing some testing with a couple of different sources. I would definitely suggest don't buy these unless you have something reasonably powerful to drive them, preferably something with a 4.4mm output. Otherwise, you're going to be bumping the volume all the way up to 100 and still not getting the optimal performance. And one other thing I should also point out, that this is a highly fit dependent IEM, meaning if the placement isn't just right in your ears, like just a millimeter out of place, the bass will lose impact and the mid-range starts to thin out. So you really need to find the right ear tips, the right, well, in my case, the right cable, just to get that optimal fit. Otherwise, the sound deteriorates quite fast. Now, the Septet doesn't have a particularly vivid or a dense presentation, but it is very airy and it is also cleanly etched. The tuning feels very deliberate, something purists will appreciate, but others may find themselves wishing for a bit more richness and body in the sound. Let's look at the graph there, and there it is, and you can see we've got quite an emphasis on the sub bass, and it falls off rather quickly, and there's not much lift at all in the mid bass. So definitely the low end here leans more towards finesse than outright force. So it's not a bass head IEM by any margin. There's good sub bass reach, and when called for, the sub bass has a nicely textured rumble. It feels tight and controlled. It doesn't bleed into the mid range, and it doesn't really it doesn't really sound anemic or too rolled off in the mid range, in the mid bass, that is. But sometimes I did find myself wishing for a little bit more in the mid and upper bass. But for the most part, there's still enough weight and presence to keep the music grounded. Like I said, definitely not a bass headset by any stretch. The bass is rather reserved, even a touch too polite at times. Although occasionally I found myself wishing for a bit more slam or physical impact in the upper bass, the overall quality of the bass is hard to fault. It's clean, it's articulate, it's refined, it's a bass that knows its place in the mix well, and it plays its part. Alright, now in the mid-range, it's clean and it's spacious. It's got a clear, open sound that keeps things free of congestion. Vocals are detailed and articulate. Mid-range note size stays fairly neutral, offering a versatile and uncolored tone, though I think a touch more warmth in the mid-range could have made it sound a little bit more natural for vocals and jazz and orchestral cuts. Mid-range transients are swift. They give nice crisp snaps to percussion instruments like toms and snares. I've got a nice clean snappy leading edge, so it adds energy without overpowering the mix. Instruments sit distinctly in that spacious stage too, like from synths to guitars, whatever you want to point your finger at. The mid-range is both detailed and still for the most part reasonably musical. It's a refined presentation, it oozes fidelity, and it's pretty good when it comes to engagement, but it's definitely got excellent clarity. And then in the treble is probably going to be the polarizing point for the septet. It's upfront, it's lively, and it's airy. It's a highly detailed, like super detailed treble, probably class leading in fact. And it's generally smooth, though that can vary depending on the recording. Treble heads will likely love the energy and the highs here, but people who are sensitive to the treble might find the septet fatiguing, especially if you are sensitive to that sort of 6 to 8 kilohertz range where sibilance tends to reside. And I wouldn't call these sibilant per se, but they're not very forgiving on poorly recorded material. The treble isn't thin, it's not overly sharp, it's just presented rather forward in the mix relative to the bass and the mid-range. And despite its rather bold character, overall it's a technically impressive treble. And then finally the Soundstage, and this is what people are going to go wild about when they talk about the septet. The Soundstage is super wide, it's super expansive, oh my god, it's so spacious. And that is true, it does have a great soundstage. It can project sounds slightly outside of the headspace past your ears. There is good instrument separation, pretty solid imaging and positional cues as well. And once again, the detail retrieval is above average. Even the slightest micro details are revealed with this IEM. And overall, it's a good sounding IEM. However, there is just a little bit of a, just a little bit of a glowing halo around notes. There is a slight thinness to some treble notes, and the mid-range notes could be slightly denser to present a more natural sound. All right, let's do a couple of comparisons, starting with the Tent Gym Origin. And some people might not like this comparison because the Origin is just a single dynamic driver and the Septet is a quadbrid 7 driver IEM. I don't care about that. I care that these are both around the same price point and they're both recent releases, so they're quite relevant in my opinion. Anyway, the Origin has got more bass presence overall, despite not having as much of a boost in the sub bass, but it has a more linear transition from the lowest part of the bass to the upper bass, which gives it, to my ears, a more natural and a cohesive sound. Being a single dynamic driver, cohesiveness is definitely going to be something that the Origin does better. The Origin's mids are more forward, they're more intimate, and they have slightly more note body, so slightly thicker notes in the mid-range, which gives them a more natural presentation. On the other hand, the Septet's mids are more spacious, but they're thinner, they have more upper harmonics and sharper transients. Then the Origin's treble is smoother, it's not as airy as the Septet, but it is less fatiguing. And the soundstage on the Tent Gym isn't as wide, obviously, but it has slightly better note density again and a more organic warmth in the treble. And when it comes to detail retrieval, the Origin comes surprisingly close to the Septet, but yeah, you probably knew already, the Septet is going to trump the Origin when it comes to micro detail retrieval. Not by a whole lot, but enough that you will notice if you are looking out for it. Okay, next up we've got Kiwi Ears' own Astral. Now the Astral here is, I believe it's a 7 driver as well, with 1 dynamic driver and 6 balanced armatures. Let me know in the comments if I've remembered that wrong. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And the Astral, by the way, it is slightly more expensive, I think, like $20 or $30 more for the Astral. It's got 3D printed resin shells compared to the all metal shells on the Septet. And the body of the Astral is pretty big as well. So if you've got really small ears, that might be an issue for you. Even for me with reasonably large ears, they are pretty chunky in terms of width. So they do protrude out from your ears a bit, but they are comfortable. But onto the sound bits and things. So the Astral, first of all, is far more efficient and requires much less driving power than the Septet. Like, this is a very efficient IEM. You can plug it into pretty much anything and have ear blasting levels of volume. So Astral has a punchier and more impactful bass. It's got a slightly warmer overall tonality. It sounds more natural. It sounds more lifelike, but it doesn't have the same spaciousness or the same expansive soundstage as the Septet. The Astral's mid-range has got more body, and it's got a very upfront presentation that really grabs your attention. And while the Astral's detail retrieval is quite good, the Septet takes that to another level entirely. It reveals every minute detail in the recording, but that's somewhat at the cost of sounding brighter and less natural. So the Astral, pretty good detail retrieval, but not nearly as good as the Septet. However, it does end up sounding a bit more natural and less fatiguing. So after that word salad, what do I actually think about the Septet? This is a very interesting IEM. I do like it. I did find that I had to readjust the position in my ears quite regularly just to get that optimal fit. Otherwise, like I said, the bass would start to thin out and the mids would start to thin out. So for some reason, not the best fitting IEM for me, although it's not really different from any other number of IEMs that I don't have a problem with. But all that aside, it is an enjoyable IEM. I just didn't engage with it that well. Like, to me, an expansive soundstage is fun and it can be impressive, but if the tonality isn't on point, then it just doesn't engage me quite as much. So for that reason, I actually prefer the Astral, and I will be doing a review of this one fairly soon. So subscribe now if you haven't, if you don't want to miss that one. And overall, look, I think this is a pretty impressive IEM, especially in terms of technicalities. Considering the price, $269, you are getting a lot of performance for that. And I'm not going to be mad at you if you buy these and love them. But for me, it wouldn't be my choice for a daily driver. Having said that, I'm going to wrap it up there. So thanks for watching the video. And if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, Pa Family Audio File Style. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. And until next time, I'll see you later.